Thanks to the Earth's rotation for making this episode possible. It makes my day. Hey, I'm Kevin. I'm single and almost all of my friends are married, but that hasn't stopped me from being in their lives. In this podcast, I will talk with these friends and try to prove that, though friendships between married and single people might seem intimidating at first, it's really not that hard. Trust me, if I can do it, you can do it. I have absolutely no vocational qualifications whatsoever. I might be coming at it with a Christian worldview, but I don't work in ministry and I'm not a counselor. What I do have to offer is experience. Over a third of my life spent being what my friends have dubbed a professional third wheel. I'm excited. I usually have 3 people on this show, but today I'm actually sitting across from a fellow professional third wheel, Pastor Sam Allberry. How's it going, man? Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me on. Thank
you. Sam has trekked all the way to my apartment, so I'm very appreciative of that. A lot of times I go to other people the same way with a podcast as I do just with my life, and Sam is also very good at coming to people, so appreciate that. It's funny, it was actually Sam's idea to turn this. I don't know if you even remember this, but it was your idea to turn this into a podcast to begin with.
I think I do remember. We were in 8th and Roast.
Yeah. And I brought it to you, and I was really worried about aggregating marital advice and offering it up in place of my married friends. And you were like, well, just make it a podcast and have them say it themselves. And I was like, duh, yes, I work in that field already. Why wouldn't I do that? And I think it's turned out really well. I think it's been a really good balance of things. But we refer to your books all the time on this podcast, actually, not just me, like a lot of people who are on have read 7 Myths of Singleness and a few others. And I appreciate you giving us language to talk with. And honestly, I didn't read your book until I guess last month, maybe. I think I may have texted you when I did, but I was really afraid of comparing myself to what you had already done. And I was also really afraid of absorbing your language and your experiences and accidentally speaking from those rather than my own, because you can do that sometimes. Yeah. And but it actually was the opposite experience. Waiting to the end made me feel so much better about all the work I've done already on this podcast. I felt a lot of camaraderie just with some of the experiences that you've had with kids and just with, feeling lonely or like pursuing friends and wondering if you're doing too much. It made me feel like what I've done is actually the truth, which I do believe it is, but now I really believe it is. So it's been great to kind of compare those notes. And but yes, you're definitely more eloquent than I am.
Well, with writing, you look more eloquent because you spend months rewriting it to get it just right.
That's true. And with speaking, you sound more eloquent because you're British. So
that helps.
It does help.
People think I know what I'm talking about.
Oh, but kind of want to just get into some practicals of your life, because I honestly don't know what your day-to-day life looks like with hanging out with friends and things like that. You're not afraid to third wheel, obviously. That's been most of your life. And how many friends would you say, if you could even put a number on it, that are married, do you have? Because I know it's a lot.
It is a lot. I have no idea how many. And I'm in this weird situation of being in 2 worlds at the moment because I'm still waiting to live here full time.
Right.
So I'm split between here and the UK and wherever else I happen to be, which means I don't have a normal yet. I don't have a Nashville normal. I'm here for a couple of weeks. I'm gone for a couple of weeks. So I'm still figuring out what normal life in Nashville is going to look like.
Yeah.
But certainly back in the UK, the vast majority of my friends would be married. Probably very few who weren't. I feel like over here, I have more friends who are unmarried.
Okay.
I think just because I've gone from a town to a city, there's just more people around, more varied demographics in a place like Emmanuel. So I feel like I've got both more single friends here and more empty nest older friends as well.
That's true. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, at least it's nice to have like a good amount of people to go back to when you do have to be at home. I mean, it sounds like everywhere you go, you've got somebody to hang out with, which is really cool.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate like that. I used to think I was an introvert. I think I was just shy.
Yeah.
Because actually, I really do like being around people. I had to go back to the UK this past week just for 3 days. It was a slightly random thing, but there's some meetings I needed to be at. And for the other 2 days, my instinct was who can I catch up with? Who's around? Who haven't I seen for a few months?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to see people.
I used to feel the same way when I came to college. I was hyper introverted. Like getting involved in like a Bible study and just going without knowing anybody there was like the bravest thing I've ever done in my life. And I feel like as somebody who works from home, I've really appreciated just kind of the standing plans I've made with my married friends, because we do, I've got like 4 a week that I go see every night, and we don't talk about them. We just do them. And, but keeping motivation, working for yourself, living by yourself is very hard. And I've always kind of used hanging out with them as the carrot, in terms of like get through the day. If I do a good job, then I have this to look forward to at night. And so I think that's the same conclusion I've come to, is like, I do want to be here. I do want my own time, but being with them definitely is where I get my energy later in its proper place. So I definitely feel that. I was thinking about your book the other day because you were talking about, and this is not something I'd ever thought about before, but was really cool. When you travel, I think you've said that you prefer to stay with other people over hotels, and not just like because you want to see them and catch up, but because it keeps you disciplined and accountable to a different rhythm of life that isn't your own.
Yeah. And, there are times I regret that for sure and would rather have a hotel
Well,
room.
yes, kids and stuff too. But
yeah, I mean, I was staying with a friend back in England for a night last week, and he's got 3 young daughters. And so you wake up when they wake up. Mm-hmm. I would have slept in longer if it had just been me, especially with the jet lag. But yeah, it's good to have other people's rhythms to have to conform to, and not just to be a lord to yourself.
Yeah,
it's too easy to be self-centered as a single person, and so much of my life is I'll eat when I'm wanting to eat, and I'll go out when I want to go out, and so it's good to kind of voluntarily constrain oneself and try to adapt to someone else.
Absolutely. Well, and me and my friend were talking because we both very much desire to be married someday, and a lot of our singleness has been spent observing our married friends and trying to learn from them, which is a lot of what this podcast is too, is just trying to take lessons as a single person. So, I mean, you want to believe the Lord's got you single for a reason, because he does. And I guarantee you one of those reasons is to make you wiser, because the Lord desires that for us. So why wouldn't I try to go into it a little smarter rather than just putting my head in the sand until the Lord brings somebody to me? You won't find anybody that way either. But if you get married, you are constraining yourself to another person's routines and schedules. And so it is healthy.
Although to be fair, a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, I think so.
Because a lot of people are thinking, no, I'm getting married so that person can fulfill me. Mm-hmm. You don't always think through the full ramifications of what it is to, covenant yourself to somebody else and pledge to revolve around them a bit.
Yeah, when I worry about myself, because I've lived with maybe 3 people now, and that's kind of the closest you come as a single person to being married, is living with a roommate of some sort, or maybe living with a married couple, but it's different. But I don't do very well with people whose rhythms are very different from mine, and just, cleanliness and all that kind of stuff. And it's really been something I've had to work on. And so I've ended up living by myself again. I'm just like, you know what? The day that I start doing that will be the day I find somebody. And I think I will find it difficult when the time comes, but I think being in love with somebody helps a little bit. It's kind of a little bit different than having another dude in the apartment. It's just different, but I hope anyway. I know Ray calls that chemical crazy. So I'm kind of hoping a little bit of that will help me change a bit. That's really the only ways you have to practice, is to have a roommate, or to live with married people, or just to hang out with married people regularly and see how that does influence your life, and see how you do bend and if you can handle it or not. Because I think if you can't handle hanging out with a married couple that has kids and you can't bend a little bit, then you need to look at yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
But, I was curious, because this is something a lot of this podcast is spent talking about, because a lot of my friends have gotten married in the last 5 years. So I'm still new to a lot of these relationships, but a lot of it's been spoken about transitioning from them having a non-married friend to having a married friend. And I don't know about you, but I always kind of feel like if you don't nail that, you kind of lose your friendship in some ways. Like, I just think that transition's super important. And I know you've made it a lot of times too with your friends getting married.
Yeah, and I've seen it go both ways. I think I talk in the book about a friend of mine who I have since nicknamed Frodo, because when the ring went on, we never saw him again.
Yes.
And that wasn't just, his single friends who felt that, his married friends felt that as well. But that he married someone who wanted him to enter into her social world, but she didn't want to enter into his. And given he's the kind of guy who's fairly passive and lets her make most of the social arrangements, it just meant she only ever arranged to see her friends and not his friends. So he dropped off the radar. I ran into him a few years later randomly, and he kind of expressed how much he'd regretted that. But it's something I'm always mindful of, and I've said to a couple of my friends, please make sure we don't lose contact. Just because I know so many guys where it's easier for them just to let their now wife make all the social arrangements and decide who to have round and when to have people round, and often his friends won't be on her radar in the way that her friends are.
Right.
But I've seen it go the other way when it's been wonderful. 2 of my closest friends back in the UK, I will see them sometimes one-on-one, then we'll go out for lunch or something, just the 2 of us, and catch up. Other times I'm hanging out with them and their family. And often it's the wife who is saying to them, you need some time with Sam.
Oh.
So I kind of feel like there's an ally there
Yeah.
in terms of that friendship. And I hope that's the case. I've always prayed that I would help my married friends be better husbands. But it means something to me if in both of those cases their wives are seeing something in them which makes her think, I think a day with Sam would actually do him some good and I'd get my husband back a bit more
Yeah.
as a result of that. Not seeing my friendship as something that takes away from it, or, I'm not trying to compete with their wife for their attention or their time or anything like that. But I love the mix of that. It would be weird if I only saw them just on their own without their family, but it would also be weird if I never saw them on their own.
Right.
So it's nice to have a bit of both, I think.
I generally call that trying not to divide the house
Yeah.
when you come in, and I think that's why it's so important to be friends with both of them, because if the wife trusts you, then especially if you bring out something in her husband that she finds good and desirable and good for their marriage, then
Well, and with one of these friends, he's someone who can struggle with depression from time to time. So I know that if I don't hear from him, that may be a sign he's not doing great.
right.
But, I've said to his wife many times, please give me a heads up. And she does. Every now and then she'll drop me a line saying, hey, he's not doing well at the moment. So I hope that helps her as well, to feel like she's got someone
Yeah.
else who's looking out for her husband and praying for him. But I appreciate having her give me a heads up if things aren't going well. I can try and be a bit more proactive
Absolutely. Yeah.
and thoughtful.
So that's super awesome to have multiple people looking out for somebody who does struggle with that, because it's what you need, right? You
Yeah.
need people who won't let you get away with being alone and going down that hole. But
Given I'm in a different country to this brother as well, I can't just get in the car and drive around and see him. So
right.
yeah, I need that extra intel.
Yeah. It makes me think about my best friend lives in Oklahoma. We were in high school together and, knew each other for about 7 years. And I didn't know his fiance when he got engaged. So I, got in a car and drove down there immediately and hung out for about a week. And, they were still living in different places. But when he was at work, I would go with her and we'd run errands and stuff and just trying to get to know her. So I'm like, I got to make up for lost time. And when they got married, I came down there and she has a very fun family. They play games together. They're all just super vibrant, extroverted people. I just remember being really nervous because when I went down there for all the rehearsal stuff, they were staying with her family and I was staying with her family. And I walked in and one of the grandmas goes, "This is the best man. Have you met the best man?" And literally led me around to every one of them. And I was so accepted just because I had been a good friend to their future, relative.
Wow.
And all of her friends asked me to go out after the wedding and hang out because I had been so good to the man that their best friend was marrying. That's meant more to me than a lot of things. And they still remember me. It's amazing. I can't remember all their names and they still remember my name. It's very,
That's so cool.
very meaningful. Yeah. And, but yeah, it's just really cool when you do see somebody and you do treat them well, how the people who really care about them notice that and they want you around. And, like you said, I think that's the highest compliment you can get as a single person is I want my spouse to hang out with you because it's good for them, or come hang out with both of us because we like what you bring to our dynamic or whatever, and come watch our kids because we need help.
Yeah.
I generally try to be a bit more structured with my podcast in terms of questions I ask and everything, but I honestly selfishly just kind of want to pick your brain, just me as a person. So if other people benefit from it, I'm glad. But this is more just me. You've got some experience on me, and I feel a little bit.
I think you're calling me old, but I'll take that.
Maybe so. I don't know. Well, you've got a little more experience on me, and I'm 31 now, so I'm not feeling super young myself. But I'm just curious. How things change as time goes on versus where I am now, where all my friends are still kind of getting married and they haven't been married for super long, or, a lot of them don't have kids yet and they're starting to have them or whatever. Is there anything you can think of that I should expect if I stay single longer?
Yeah, things have changed for me, and I don't know how much of that is because I'm older and I've learned things. I don't know how much of it is because the context I'm living in has changed. So I've moved from a town in the UK to living in Nashville. But yeah, I'm enjoying my singleness far more in my 40s than I did in my 30s.
Oh, wow.
I think partly because where I was when I was in my 30s, as in geographically where I was in a town that is really where you go to raise kids. There's not much else to do there. It's the place you move out of London to have a backyard and a place to raise kids and that kind of stuff. So I was surrounded by a lot of young parents, plus my own peers were young parents as well. So I think that is the stage of life where most people are understandably least socially available, which again is is entirely understandable. I think one of the frustrations with that is that they're socially less available, but actually are probably in greater need of friends and allies than they have been at any other time. But there's a kind of belief, certainly where I come from, that if you're the new parents, you've got to be self-sufficient, self-contained. You've got to be able to manage and cope.
Yeah.
And having other people help who aren't relatives is seen as some sort of sign of failure. So that was difficult because people didn't want your help if you're a single guy, because the perception is, what help could you be?
Right.
And they don't really have time to see you socially either. Therefore, I ended up with a lot of what I think Rosaria Butterfield calls catch up with friends rather than do life with friends. So the kind of people who love to see you every 3 months just to catch up. But you need far more than that in life. So my 30s were harder, I think. I was living on my own. And in hindsight, that probably wasn't wise either, given that the social kind of situation, there just weren't people to hang out with, or very few people to hang out with.
Yeah.
That was probably a lonelier time of life. And I think things have changed now, partly because the circumstances have changed. I have roommates in my house and I have a lot more folks around who are up for doing life together. Right. So that's made it much, much better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful. A little depressing, but helpful, because that is where I'm headed. A lot of my friends are having kids now, and my friends Andrew and Maria, they've been on this podcast actually. They've got a girl coming at the end of the month, and I very much already see signs of them retreating into themselves, even though they very much do not want to do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of girding up my loins to keep after them. And, they live down the road. So like, I'm going to bring them dinner and just sit with them, in between feedings and cryings and all of that.
Well,
and
this is something else that I, every now and then you get surprised by something. And I remember chatting to a young couple at church, this is back in England, who had young kids, 3 young kids, and they invited me around one evening and we were just chatting about stuff. And as we were leaving, I said, "Oh, thanks for fitting me in." And it was the wife who said, "Sam, I just needed to talk to someone who wasn't a parent." Because she said that all of her life at the moment is being around other mums. So the only topic of conversation they ever have is mum stuff.
Yeah.
She said, "I just needed to," I can't remember exactly how she put it, but it was something like, "I needed to talk to someone from the outside world again." So she's like, she was asking me lots of questions about my life and what I was up to, and she just wanted to hear from someone who wasn't a young mum.
Interesting. Okay.
So that again made me think, okay, there's more ways to serve as a single person than we sometimes realize.
Yeah, that's super cool, because I feel like the first level of that comes when your friends do get married, because I do feel like there's a tendency, and I've seen actually a pushback on this kind of in my group of friends, but there's a tendency for married people to hang out with other married people, especially when they're in the same stage of marriage.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of a thing, but then you do end up talking about marriage stuff. And I've had a lot of married friends tell me it's actually just easier. Like, I don't worry about hanging out with you because it's a very balanced conversation. It's not having to get to know 2 people at the same time. And it does kind of take us outside of the things that we're doing every day. And like, sometimes you want camaraderie and the things of like, oh, we struggled with this last week. Well, yeah, we struggle with that too, because we're married. And then sometimes they're like, I just don't want to talk about that anymore. We've been working on it all week. I want to do something else. Or I want somebody who will bring something new into the house. But it's funny to think about it being a second, probably more intense phase when it comes to kids, because it's hard enough not to get absorbed into your marriage, but to get absorbed into being a parent only in name.
Well, particularly for mothers who aren't working.
Oh, yeah.
And so their whole day is looking after little ones and talking to other people who are doing the very same thing. I can imagine getting cabin fever.
Yeah, and maybe even just starting to lose your identity a little bit, like,
where were my interests?
Yeah, exactly.
Where do they go?
Yeah, and so it's kind of cool to have friends who can enjoy their interests more, but have the same interests that you do, to kind of bring them to you sometimes. But that's not something I ever thought about. I hope that's something I can help people with. I was really curious. You hang out with a lot of people, and you hang out with a lot of people with a very wide age range. So you hang out with a lot of people way younger than you and a lot of people way older than you. And that's amazing to me. A lot of people have noticed it and been like, man, Sam's really good at that. Like, how did he do that? And I was like, I don't know how he does that. Do you think it's your broad range of interests that makes that easy? Or do you think that it's experience? Or is it just something that you're just naturally good at? Or what would you think?
I've honestly never thought about it. You meet someone, you become friends. And again, I think it's partly a stage of life thing that, again, people who are more socially available I'm in my mid-40s, so that a lot of people who've got more time to hang out are going to be younger than me and unmarried, or older than me and empty nesters.
That's true, yes.
So some of the people I'm closest to are 15, 20 years younger than me, or 15, 20 years older than me. But I love that because it's an expression of having family in Christ. I've got people who feel like they're spiritual mums and dads to me, and I've got people who feel like they're spiritual kids to me in some way.
Yeah.
It's not been any kind of clever design on my part. It's just the way that the cookies crumbled and the people I've ended up.
Yeah, it really is an availability thing. I hadn't really thought about that because, those are the people who are like, hey, you want to come over and have dinner? Or, hey, you want to go out and do something? And
I do have friends my own age as well.
Of course.
Cut that demographic out. But,
Well, that's the group that you're typically going to and pursuing yourself because you've got that freedom. And you do have to make more time and effort for a lot of people your age sometimes.
It just does me good as well to, when you're at like high school, all of your friends are in exactly the same year as you.
Right.
You're all in exactly the same age and stage. And even someone who's 2 years older than you feels like they're sort of in some other world. But there is something healthy and perspective giving. Having friends in their 70s and friends in their 20s puts my own stage of life in perspective a bit. I can look at the guys who are younger and think, I kind of don't have that level of energy, but I'm glad I know some of the things that I know now and that I didn't know then. And I look at some of my friends in their 70s and think, they're showing me what it looks like to sort of face into that stage of life in a godly way. It's a good way for me to think, but that's going to be me sooner than I think. It just puts life in perspective.
Yeah. It's fun to think that you become a more rounded person the more people you hang out with. I think that's really cool
We're designed for it. We're designed for, people who are older than us, people who are younger than us. I used to oversee the small groups in my previous church, which meant people would often come up to me saying, I'm looking for a small group to join. And it was always one of those tricky things where people almost always wanted to join a small group of people who were just like them.
Yeah.
So we're a couple, we've got kids, we're new to being parents. Can you put us in a group with other new parents? And you sort of think, I can, but you're just all going to have the same blind spots. You're all going to have the same lack of expertise and lack of experience. You're going to amplify each other's needs rather than. And it may be, I had to try to say to people, I'll put you in a group where there's at least one other couple with new kids, but actually you need to be around some people who've been there and done that and come out the other end. You need to be around some people who also don't have kids. And church is the great opportunity to have that kind of mixing and mingling.
And I mean, that's a lot of the reason that this podcast was made is because this is the same thing. Single people, they look at married people and they go, oh, other, like I can't hang out with that. It's not like me, and vice versa. And we actually had an episode about small groups because small groups are a great place to meet people who aren't like you. And sometimes in my instance, it was the first time I started hanging out with people who were already married rather than just my friends who had gotten married.
And hanging out with people who are like us is easier.
Oh, for sure.
But it's less enriching.
It really glorifies God when him being the thing in common is what you base your friendship on and grows out of that. Have you could ever kind of notice some common ingredients in some of your friendships with married people and ones that you just really feel like are really good? Just to jumpstart your brain, I guess, like mine has been like communicating on the front end that like, I'm not somebody who has to be entertained. I'm somebody there who actually wants to do life with you and like will fit into whatever routine. I've just seen people's shoulders relax when they realize that like Kevin can come over and the house can be a wreck, or, the kids can be running around acting terrible and he doesn't care. It's fine. He's happy to be there.
I think that really helps a lot of people is you can take them as you find them and that's okay. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's I'm interested in the real person in their real life and not some idealized version of it. One thing that has been significant for me, I say a lot in the book about how friendship with married people can be asymmetrical. That's understandable. That's almost inevitable. But it's going to be hard for me if they're never taking the initiative. And I think the things where it's worked out well for me, and some of this may just be the way that I'm wired, is where I don't feel like it's always me reaching out to them, but actually I feel like I'm needed on some level by them as well. If I don't hear from them, I know that I will do after a while. It's not just going to be me constantly pestering them. And there's one couple who I sort of drifted apart from because I realised, and again, I get the logistical asymmetricalness of this, but they would never come to my place, ever. And I wouldn't expect them to much, but never at all sort of made me feel like, okay, I feel like I think I put it in terms of, I feel like I'm the guest star in their show.
Oh, yeah.
But they're not actually interested in my world, stepping into my world. And yeah, that made me sort of think, I don't think they actually want to be part of my life. I think they just want me to be an occasional part of their life.
Yeah.
And that made me think, okay, they may not be the people I prioritize going forwards. I'll still care about them and every now and then see how they're doing. But that was a significant moment for me.
Oh, for sure. Some of my best friends, it took them 1.5 years to get out here. I've lived here for 3 years now. It's just the way it was. And it's the kids and things like that. It's just not always practical. But it does, when you really know somebody or you're really friends with somebody, it's really cool to see where they live. It's kind of, it tells you something about it, And yeah, I don't know what you've learned about me walking around my place, but it's.
You were really disturbed. I mean,
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's some people don't come here very often, but yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I like meeting my friends' parents because I just get to see where they came from.
You get to know more dimensions of someone when you see their home life and you see their family life.
Yeah. Oh, and it was really crazy that you brought that up because that was a question I had way later down in my list here. But that's been a huge struggle for me, the constant pursuing, because that's something that I get praised for a lot, is being persistent and being a pursuer and being loyal. And I'm like, yeah, that's all well and good, but I would like a little reciprocation every once in a while, because you do have those days where you're like, if I just stopped texting all of my friends, would I have any friends left? Would any of them ever reach out?
There's that sort of fear of, for how many days would my dead body need to be rotting at home before someone eventually realized?
Yes. No, I had a really bad day where I used to work on Ray Orltund's podcast, and I was setting them up and teaching them how to use all the mics because they did all that on their own for a while. And we were out at Heidi's house, and she lives way in the country with no cell reception.
Yeah.
And I remember I was setting things up, and I remember her saying to me, "Do you want the Wi-Fi so you can use your phone?" And I said, "Oh, nobody needs me right now. It's fine. I don't have to be at work today, nothing." And so I didn't do anything, and we got it all set up and everything. Well, when I got into my car to go home, my phone started going nuts, and my boss was after me over and over. And I called him back. I was like, "Dude, why are you calling me like 50 times? And he goes, "Where are you? Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm fine. What's up?" He goes, "You were supposed to be at the studio today." And I looked at my schedule. I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I totally forgot. Like, we just missed each other." But he's like, "You are always where you say you're going to be." And he goes, "I've literally driven down to your apartment and like checked in your windows or tried to see if you were okay," because he had that. He went down that really dark mental rabbit hole. I was like, "Dude, the police won't even come look for me for 2 days." But he went down that dark rabbit hole of like, who would come find you? Somebody needs to come find you if something has happened. And I was like, that's a terrible thought. But yeah, I hope I have enough people now that and that's a good thing about doing what you say you're going to do, is if you don't do what you say you're going to do and you have a history of it, people do notice, which is good encouragement for just being on time and hanging out with people and not flaking, I guess. But like, I felt very flattered and very horrified at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a similar thing. It's a scary thought. I'm curious if there's anything kind of, maybe just specific memories here, because I know every couple is different, but are there any things that you've ever like tried to do for some of your married friends and you're just kind of trying it out, or maybe you didn't even think about it and they came back to you later and they're like, "That meant so much to us," or "That made us feel so loved," and you were just like, "Oh, I should do more of that"?
Yeah, and it really varies from couple to couple.
Right.
I remember one of my dear friends, when they had their second child, there were times she would just not stop crying. I would pick her up and hold her for a while, and I remember them saying to me once, when she started crying, you didn't just hand her back, you just carried on holding her, and you kind of walked around the garden, you did anything to distract her. And I don't know whether I'd been kind of consciously thinking I should take her for a bit longer and just give them a break or quite what, but it was interesting that was something they noticed, because I guess typically when the baby loses it, that's when
anybody who's
baby
not
gets
a parent,
returned.
That's well, because you have to build up like an immunity to it to some degree, because it is alarming. Like your natural instinct is to hand it off to somebody who can make it stop.
Yeah. So that was interesting. There's another family I've sometimes given their kids a ride to a music lesson or to school or something if they've had one of those logistically challenging weeks where they're outnumbered by their kids and everyone's got different commitments. That kind of thing's fun because you get a little bit of one-on-one time with a kid. You get to ask how they're really doing and, get all the goss about their friends and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of fun to do as well. And that can help a family just by running a few errands. And occasionally frequently I've done this. I've said to married friends, hey, let's catch up. I'd love to host, but I'm assuming it'll be easier for me to come to you. But why don't I at least come and cook dinner in your house? Mm-hmm. So I've done that several times for friends.
Yeah.
It's easier for them not to have to uproot the whole family to my place, but it's also nice for them to be cooked for, and I'll take the dishes and do them at home. And,
right.
It's another way to serve. That's fun to do that.
Yeah, I'm not quite brave enough yet. I've cooked for some people a couple of times, but it was really more of a they had to come to me kind of thing at the time. Most for me, that just looks like picking up Chick-fil-A on the way over or something like that, which is something that happens a lot, and it's a privilege to be able to do because I love it too. But most of my friends, if they ask their kids what they want, they just say get Chick-fil-A. So that's what we do.
You can't really go wrong with it.
Yeah, that is all great stuff. And if I had to think of one for myself, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about of being somebody who is persistent when people don't answer. Because I've had to learn for years, I'm a very good texter and most people are not. And a lot of my philosophy on texting is very different than a lot of people because I can do it very conversationally, where a lot of people, it's a thing to throw out to be like, hey, we're going to schedule something and then we get in person, which is all fine. I'm cool with that too. But I learned how to text because texting had just come out when I started dating in like 7th or 8th grade. So my first texting thing was like literally a relationship with somebody. And I think it's ruined me in some ways because I take things very personally sometimes when people don't text me back in a decent time. And I'm just like, well, they just don't like me. But it's like, honestly, you can't leave your text on read. So that's the biggest problem is people just, they look at it and it goes away and they don't have a chance to answer at the time and they forget.
And I find if mine drops off the bottom of the screen, it's harder for me to remember that I need to reply to something.
Right, which is that's something that I get a lot of praise for, but it's kind of a bittersweet praise when people are like, hey, thanks for staying after us to make this happen or whatever. Thanks for pinging us when 3 days went by and we didn't respond. And I also find that what constitutes a reasonable amount of time definitely varies between your friends as well. Like some people, you know them enough to know like, no, they've forgotten. And some of them you're like, no, it really takes them that long to actually get in a room together and talk about things. But yeah, a lot of them will say thanks for doing that. And it's hard because I have to trust that they mean that and they're not just being like, well, he was annoying, but we're here now and we're just trying to make him feel better, So it's it's a little bit of I have to really try my best to believe that they mean it and tell them like, listen, if I am being annoying, you need to let me know because I won't know and I will keep doing it. And I don't want to wear out my welcome before I get there, essentially. But what are some things over the years that your married friends have done that you've especially remembered feeling loved for?
Yeah, this is something that happened actually last summer. I was in Australia doing some ministry, was speaking at a particular church, and a friend of mine is one of the pastors who works there. And they had me sat somewhere where I could easily access the pulpit, so I was slightly off to the side. And he walked in with his wife, and this was still some time before the service began, and they said, are you sitting on your own? Can we join you? So I said, oh, please do. And this had never happened before. In one sense, it's really small and trivial, but in another sense, it actually affected me quite profoundly. They came and sat with me, but they sat either side of me.
Oh,
and I suddenly thought, oh, they're sitting with me. I'm not sitting with them.
Ah,
no one's ever done that before.
That is amazing advice. Wow.
But it made such a difference. I really felt like they had come to sit with me rather than I could just join them. And I was then talking about that with another friend of mine who said that at the church she's at, her and her husband almost never sit together because this is the time to sit with other people. And I thought, yeah, that's really thoughtful. I don't think many married couples think in that way. But yeah, and she was even saying, other people will sit with their kids, and sometimes she's sat with a friend and is thinking, better just check my kids are sat with someone and, being looked after. But I love that idea of sharing family. It's another form of hospitality.
Yeah.
Whereas I think sometimes at church, everyone sits in their family unit. So yeah, that was very meaningful.
Man, I've never
It's a small gesture, but
Yeah.
it actually had a big impact on me.
How old was that couple?
They would be in their 50s.
That is such a meaningful gesture. I just never really thought about that because I do know some people who are very like, our marriage, we do it when we're together. We see each other all the time. We don't have to see each other when we're in public. Like we can go together. We can talk about it when we leave. But while we're there, we're secure enough. Everybody knows we're married. We're fine. We can go off and hang out with other people. And well, there you go. If you're married and you're listening to this, you can do this way earlier than your 50s too.
Yes.
So are there, because I've tried to spend a lot of this podcast really just being like, there's a lot of growing together and learning how to hang out with each other. There's a lot of ways that you offend each other. There's a lot of ways you have to communicate to make sure that everybody's boundaries are good when you hang out with married people as a single person. But I wonder, just from your time, if there's anything that kind of made you feel the opposite of loved.
Those have been very few and far between for me.
That's really
thankfully
good.
I think because I've been publicly single for a long time now, and I've been open about sexuality being part of that. That got me out of the people trying to set me up or nag me to get married thing. That would happen a lot, particularly when I was, I think, in my early 30s. I'd have friends who were newly married and a little bit smug. Sort of, come on, Sam, you could be as happy as I am. And I'm sort of like, oh, I hope I'm not as unbearable as you are.
Right.
So I've been spared a lot of that just because people don't do that anymore, which is nice.
Right. The question, so are there any girls in your life, is always a very bittersweet one for me, because in some sense, like, it's nice to have people inquire about that and to care because they know I want to be married. They want me to be married. But on the other hand, it does kind of feel like a criticism sometimes when you don't have anything.
Here's how I've learned how to ask the question in a way that doesn't sound like pressure.
Okay.
And the same applies to if I'm talking to married friends about whether they're hoping to have kids or not. So I'll sometimes say to someone, do you feel much pressure to be getting married? Or I'll say to a young married couple, do you feel much pressure to be having kids? It's a way of broaching the topic without it sounding like I have an agenda. Because if you say to someone, have you thought about getting married? It sounds like you're telling them to hurry up.
Right.
If you say to a couple, you're trying to have kids, I don't know, maybe a incredibly painful thing that they're struggling with. So, but I find that's a healthier way of putting it because it's not assuming any particular thing about them.
Right. That's good.
So if you're married and want to ask Kevin about his love life, that's one way of...
Just ask me if I feel pressure and I'll say yes.
Yeah.
I'm curious if this ever happens to you, because this is something I'm actually like really, really new with, honestly. But have you ever been kind of around a couple that is kind of going through some stuff and there's a little bit of tension there when you hang out with the couple and you kind of have to navigate like, okay, I know from them telling me that they're struggling, and I even know maybe some details of why they're struggling, and we're here trying to hang out, and I feel like I'm caught in between it to some degree, and I feel like I have to kind of filter what I say to avoid stepping on a landmine of something that could remind them of why they're having problems or whatever. It's something that it's fairly new to me. That's mostly what I've found to do so far is just try to keep things light, try to bring some entertainment and joy into their lives to, not escapism, but just to remind them of the things they like about each other, but also not putting too much pressure on myself because it's not my job to fix whatever problem they have. Yeah. I haven't got to the point of being like, guys, it's really uncomfortable because I really don't want to do that if I can help it. But I don't know if you've ever been in that situation because it is new to me and I'm still trying to navigate it a bit.
Yeah, I've been in that situation a few times. And sometimes I will know what's going on and sometimes I won't. I'll just know that there is something going on. Yeah, and it depends on the couple. It depends on the situation. I can think of one couple I know where it was very tense when I was around there. And I know the husband well enough to know when he's being a pig. And so I will stick up for his wife when I'm around there.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm trying to hint to him
right,
to stop being a pig. But there'll be other times where it's less obvious what is going on. And yeah, you just want to help them enjoy not thinking about that for a few minutes.
Yeah.
There've been one or two times when I've been pulled in and the couple want me to help them. So I'll sit down and talk to the two of them about what's going on. And I do that slightly with fear and trembling because I'm not a marriage counsellor.
Right.
So I'll always bring a fleet of caveats of I'm not married, I have no, I'm not a reconciler.
Do you still want advice? Yeah.
But it's normally because they feel like I know them both and they just want someone to, bounce ideas off rather than they're looking for me to give some magic answer.
Yeah.
And it's often in the form of, can you pray for us? We're going through it's not an easy time for us.
Yeah.
So I'll ask each of them how they're doing and pray for them both.
Yeah. I think it'd probably be helpful just to hear how your spouse describes how they're doing to another person too.
Yeah.
Like that
particularly someone you both know and trust.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of my friends kind of things like that have been very, there is no right and wrong answer kind of stuff. Like nobody's being a pig. They're just missing each other to some degree. And there's been like subtle attempts to pull me in a way as to take sides a couple of times in a way that I was like, I'm not taking a side because you're both wrong or like you're both right. And I don't know who's right or whatever. And so I generally don't play that game. I generally avoid that and try not to, because inevitably in a lot of couples, you tend to understand one person's perspective more than the other. And I really try to be mindful of that and not show favoritism because I understand where they're coming from more than the other person because it doesn't make them right. It makes us both wrong sometimes. But yeah, I was also curious about this because I really couldn't think of much that my friends have done to make me feel unloved because they've been really good too. But have you ever been in a situation where you're hanging out and you find that the couple begins to talk to each other about something that is very much a personal, like logistics life thing. And like, there are a lot of times where like logistics, they cannot wait. Like they need to be talked about, things need to happen. But there are times where it very obviously could have waited and they decide to like hijack what you're doing to talk about it. And I find sadly that most of the time, because if it was just something that like it took 2 minutes of our time and we moved on, I wouldn't think anything about it. But a lot of times it's those things that lead to, because people have to uproot their minds and put them into this other place, it can lead to a little bit of conflict or tension as well.
Yeah.
And I don't really know, I've done it maybe once, but I don't really know how to tell them like, is there any chance that that could wait without sounding like a loser? Because I don't want to assume things could wait, but I'm also like, well, we're hanging out right now. And that's something very much not important and something very much that excludes me for a long period of time that while y'all sort this out or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't really know if I feel right in doing that or not, but
it's hard to know, isn't it? And the few times that does happen, in my experience, they've always said, no, Sam, sorry about this. Do you mind if we quickly sort this out? And I'll be like, no, go for it. And just the acknowledgement that this is, a bit of internal housekeeping.
Right.
The fact that they're recognizing that they're doing it in front of me and that that's not ideal is enough. That covers a multitude of things. But no, it would be the equivalent of me checking my phone for long periods of time and reading my phone whilst being with them. It's that kind of, hey, I'm here to see you, not, why. So it's I don't know how to bring it up though without making it more
awkward. Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if it's a thing that if you have to talk about it at all, you talk about it in a moment that isn't that moment, like maybe at a time where you're all just doing good or whatever. But yeah, that's all great. You enjoy your friends' kids, I've read. I very much do as well. I do wonder, because we are both male and there's a lot of scary things in the world, if there are precautions you take or conversations that you are intentional about on the front end when your friends have kids, just to make sure that you're in line with where they are comfortable and that kind of thing, because everybody does have a different line on how far they are willing to let you roughhouse and things like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I will check with the parents before doing anything. You quickly get a sense of what the parents are comfortable with and what the kids enjoy. But even if it was you're around at someone's house and one of the kids wants to take you up to their room to show you something, some new toy. Again, even that I'll check with the parents. Say, do you want me to do that? Do you want me to, And I'll say to the kid, hey, let's ask mum and dad whether to do that, whether you go and bring the toy down or, Yeah. So again, I'm just taking the cue from the parent.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because the kid will absolutely try to manipulate you. Like you do have to constantly check in because my little niece, she was like finished her food the other day and I could tell she was bored. We were all still eating and I was like, maybe if I give her a sweet potato fry, she will be less bored. But I went to give it to her and I was like, hey, is she done or is she good to have this? And parents were like, no, she can have one more. And, I gave her one and she wanted another one. I was like, how many more can I give her before I have to cut her off? Because she will literally she just turned around and looked at me and was just like, give it to me, So, but she knows she can get away with more. And so I have to make sure she doesn't, I guess, in some ways. But, and that's just trivial stuff. That's not even like really important stuff. I'm not really a rough housing kind of person, but a lot of kids I know really want that from me. And that's one that I definitely, especially with the little girl who wants to just climb all over you like a jungle gym. I'm just like, are you cool with this? Because I'm cool with it. I will be as respectful as I can and where I allow her to go and all. But like, if you're not cool with it, just let me know and I will just not let that happen. We'll have a different relationship. But it is a joy just because the roughhousing things, they like you so much more when you're willing to do what they want to do. And
it's their level, isn't it?
Yeah.
But again, it's always a check first thing. But I've got some friends who've got young kids and I'll sit on the couch and all I have to do is to say, only I am allowed on this couch. And then immediately I've got 4 little people trying to pull my limbs off and climb off and,
Yeah.
It's all good fun.
I declare king of the hill, essentially.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, man. Well, I was thinking about this the other day, and you may have seen it already, but you have a lot of friends, and it's great, and you stay busy. But inevitably, there is just the loneliness that comes to being single, and you can fight it all you want, you can ignore it all you want, but it comes for you eventually. And generally, it comes for me the night that I had a plan, and the plan got canceled, and I wasn't able to make another plan, and I'm just like, not happy about it, and you just kind of have to face that sometimes. But I wondered if you had anything, small practical thing around your house even that kind of helped you with that. And what I mean is mine is my refrigerator. I don't know if you've seen it, but I had to buy new magnets last year because I have so many letters and like postcards and Christmas cards and, pictures that my friends' kids have drawn me that I've brought home and put on the fridge. And when I look at that, there's no way to not feel loved and to not feel the community that I have, even if they're older community and I haven't seen them for a long time. I just didn't know if you had anything, if you were sentimental in that way or not, because I'm pretty sentimental.
I am. I have a little box of notes that are particularly meaningful. It's my little sort of treasure trove. And just photos of friends as well. Every now and then a friend will give me a nice picture of them and I'll have that on my desk or something or on a shelf. Yeah, little things like that just remind you that people are with you even if they're not physically there right then.
Yeah.
That helps.
I wish more people gave photos. I mean, we've become so digitized. People don't really print photos as much anymore. But I do have like a folder of photos on my phone called Sentimental. Essentially, that's basically that. But yeah, it's nice because you think about it, when you have a family, you do have pictures of the family all over the place. And your friends are your family when you're a single person, especially if you don't live in the same town as your actual family. And in some ways, they're more your family than your actual family, no matter what your relationship is with them. But yeah, I don't know. It's just something I don't know if married people think about that with single people. I think sometimes they think they're being a bother. If they're like, hey, you want a picture of my kid? Like it's presumptive, but it's like, I'd like to at least be offered. That'd be kind of nice, because I love them as, not as much as you do, but a lot. But I don't know, just simple things. Well, last thing here, and this is something that I kind of determined at the beginning of this podcast to not really sit around and complain about how the church has treated single people in the past, because I just didn't feel super productive to me. And also all of my friends are congregants. We've never been in ministry. We don't know what it's like to do it from the other side, right? So it just doesn't seem fair to only interview one side. But you have been on both sides to some degree. And I'm just honestly curious about your experience, because I don't know what it's like to try to do anything in singles ministry. I don't know if there really even should be something called singles ministry. I just know that in a church, a lot of times single people, they can feel isolated. Sometimes they can feel isolated by your attempts to not isolate them. And I just didn't know if you had any things that you've seen done really well and done really poorly that you could kind of bring to the table.
Yeah, there's no one right answer, but I do know that I've always felt a little bit hesitant about the singles ministry because it often is a way of further isolating singles from the rest of the church family. I think the key is to give a church a vision for the church being a family. I want everyone to be noticing everyone else. I don't want anyone to feel unnoticed, to feel not understood or seen, and beyond that. I don't think programs are the thing that's going to help, because what you need is relationship.
Right.
So it depends on the church. So the previous church I was at, again, very heavily weighted to young married people. So I'd sometimes be frustrated at how oblivious they could be of the needs of other people around them. And it sort of felt like the church was for them and then everyone else had to sort of fit in.
Right.
And occasionally some of them would realise the shortcomings of that. But yeah, I think generally a lot of churches are more aware of these issues than they would have been 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So I feel like things are heading in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, I also feel that actually. Yeah, I think my own experience, because I detest anything with the term single, and it adds so much pressure. It's kind of the equivalent of have you found somebody yet when you go to a singles group, because that's kind of, it reminds me of high school when dudes would just come to church to try to meet girls. Like I never, that felt like kind of making trivial of something that's very important. And just motives are very important in general. Like I don't want to just go to church to try to find somebody. And I find the opposite. When I find somebody that I want to talk to and get to know in the church, my very safe environment starts to feel less safe for me, because there's a lot of pressure on myself all of a sudden. And, you cross paths with that person and you feel like, well, I've got to go do this now. I've got to ignore this person and go talk to this person. And it really complicates things. And I'm usually just a nervous wreck until I've really stated my intentions. So the whole getting to know period is really brutal for me. But I think the happiest I've ever been in anything close to a place where single people could go and feel safe and have good relationships with each other. You were actually there a few times. A friend of ours at church had a Thursday night hangout that she would do at her house.
I was just thinking of that.
It was
and it was lovely because it wasn't for singles.
It wasn't. It was never called that. But, obviously more single people showed up because they had the flexibility to be there every week. But we had some elders in our church show up every once in a while. A lot of couples, they'd come and bring food for everybody. But it was just a really great place when somebody was new at church, no matter who they were, whether they were married, single, whatever. It was a great place to be like, hey, if you want to get plugged in really easily, I'll probably be at this thing on Thursday. And if I'm not, you will be taken care of. I trust the people there to see you. Yeah, that was the best because and a lot of people did get married out of that group, which is just, it's a consequence of single people hanging out. It's not a goal. The goal is to have, as you said, relationship with each other, community. And I mean, we'd just get together and eat and just play games, whatever that looked like. Or sometimes we were talking so much that we just would skip the game and just have a good conversation. And I think that's the first place I ever actually had an actual conversation with you. We talked about
There's
tornadoes.
a lot of people at church where that's the first place I met them.
Yeah. And somebody mentioned this the other day, but I think her being a single woman really helped with that in a way that I hadn't really thought about, because my friend, she, single female, she was like, it's a little more intimidating to come by yourself to a single male's house, even if it's a lot of people there, because one, you never know if you're going to have a short night with only a few people there. And that could be really awkward if the only people there are guys and you show up and you're the only girl. So I think that helped a lot, because dudes have no problem going to single girls' houses. That's fine, but the other way around, it could maybe feel a little more intimidating. And so I think it was optimal. I really do. I think it was just a huge blessing from the Lord. And it was her saying, I have a lot of space and a willingness to do this. And I want to build this. And it was organic. That's, I guess, the point, is that it was something that somebody else decided to do. It wasn't a forced thing by the leadership. Nobody gave it a title. It was just a night that we all hung out. There wasn't any pressure associated with it, because it was literally just a consequence of people wanting to get to know each other. That was really great. But, well, I am out of questions. You are actually a podcaster yourself. You've got a podcast with Ray Orltund right now, right? Tell me about that, because I actually don't know a whole lot about it.
Yeah, it's called You're Not Crazy.
Okay.
So it's ostensibly for younger pastors, although we found that actually seems to be serving a far wider body than that. But really, it's about church health and how can we have healthy culture in our churches and not just be places that are kind of theologically orthodox, but relationally dry, barren. So how can we cultivate honesty and safety in our church life?
And you are on season 2 now, right?
Yeah, we're going to be doing season 3 sometime soon, and we've just written a book as well together.
Oh my gosh.
Based on the same kind of stuff.
Well, that's awesome. Well, cool. Yeah, you should also go check out Sam's book, 7 Myths of Singleness. If you want to compare notes between stuff that I've talked about and stuff that he talks about, he'll probably make it more concise than I have, but it's always good to hear several people doing it and draw your own conclusions. So this is what's worked for us. Hopefully it works for you. Thanks for coming, Sam. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Good to be with you.
Well, we did it. We're at the end of the main series of episodes. Hey now, don't cry. This is where you have the best chance to get involved. And if you're just joining us, you now have a whole season to listen to. As I say in the credits, I've got some bonus episodes I'm working on, and I'm trying to cover some topics I've not yet addressed. One of these is about divorce. I'm aware that's probably the most blaring omission so far. But other than that subject, what have I not talked about that you'd like to hear? Or what have I talked about that you'd like to hear more of? This was never meant to be an indefinite podcast. I don't want to keep talking if I have nothing left to say. There's enough noise out there, and I only entered into this space because I wasn't seeing these conversations happening as much as I felt they should. But as long as there are things left to say and you guys want to hear it, I'm happy to keep going. So to reiterate one more time, there are so many ways you can get to me, and there are links to all of them in the show notes. My preference, of course, is calling in. You'll be taken straight to a voicemail box where you can leave your thoughts. I love this method because it's very much my heart's desire to do an episode having my friends answer your questions. But if that's not for you, you can always email the show or DM me on Facebook or Instagram. I read and reply to every message. Now, I know what's going through your head because it goes through mine too every time I hear a call to engagement on podcasts. Other people will reach out. I don't have anything to offer that others won't address. False. When everyone thinks that way, no one reaches out, and I have nothing to work with. So please, do your old pal a favor and ask the questions. Honestly, just knowing people listen and think about these things is what keeps me going. All right, I'm done bullying you for feedback. Unless you want to go leave a review. No, I said I was done. I've got some bonus episodes coming down the pipeline, but there won't be a definitive schedule from here on out. I'll try my best to give you a heads up when new content's on its way, and who knows, maybe we'll get to drop some random treats in the feed every now and then. I will always post on Monday mornings, though, so that's at least one thing you can rely on. Thanks so much for coming with me this far. Seriously. Remember, this show has always been ordinary people helping other ordinary people. You fall into that category, so I hope you'll partake in what has been such an edifying experience for me. Let's keep having these conversations until everyone feels seen and heard.